or your political structures, electoral systems, something that we're really going to get into for each country, look at the different types. We'll give a brief kind of overview of all the different things here in this section. We'll look at levels of government. Again, we have supranational organizations that we're going to look at a little bit, mostly with the UK, and those are organizations which nations are not totally sovereign actors. They make policies, limits some policy-making power of their member states. There's international organizations. There's regional organizations like the EU, trend towards states pulling their sovereignty to gain political, economic, and social clout to help each other out. So here's some examples. You have NATO, EU, OPEC, United Nations. Because of globalizations, these things have grown. Looking at different levels of government then, we have unitary systems, so like UK, China, Iran concentrates all the policy power or policy-making powers in one place, a geographical location. Your central government is responsible for most policies. Most countries are unitary. Federal systems like your United States, Russia, Mexico, Nigeria, divided amongst the central government subunits, for example, your states in the United States. Regional bodies have significant powers, like states can tax and make different laws. And then there's confederation, where power is spread among subunits, and they have a weak central government. So for unitary governments, I believe there's 172 federal countries, about 21. Again, the EU, I guess, would be your example of your confederation. So there's a look at some stats there and different types and where they fall. So some advantages of a federal system. Makes it easier to govern a large area. So again, physically large countries tend to have those federal agreements. China, although does not. You can accommodate for regional differences by having different laws in different areas of the country, and helps guard against one area of the country from having all the political power. Disadvantage, again, a lot of times there's lacks uniformity in different policies and voting registration requirements, and then they could create deep social divisions. Advantages of the unitary system, in a better position to kind of redistribute all the resources from different regions to the poorer regions, so trying to create some more equality. We'll talk about the idea of devolution again. Sometimes leaders of unitary systems decide to decentralize some power, so that's called devolution, transferring the power from a central location or government to some lower and regional governments. Sometimes leaders attempt to keep the country unified by giving the regional government some power so that they do not decide to leave. Other causes of devolution, ethnic forces, so maybe religion, language, customs in different areas can create this devolution, and they need different laws in certain areas. For example, Great Britain has given some power to Scottish and Welsh parliaments to create some of their own laws in their respective countries. Economic forces as well, inequalities, maybe standards of living have changed in different countries, and then spatial. Usually occur on a margin or border of the state. Maybe there's water and mountains that separate central power from the neighboring states. Again, kind of like Puerto Rico is an island close to other independent islands, so you give some power to them. Some political institutions here, so structures of the political system carry out all the work of the governing, usually creating policies. It always varies by country. The common structures are the legislatures, executive branches, judicial systems, and army and military force, and the different bureaucracies in these different countries. Again, one of the questions they're asked, does the same type of institution serve the same function in two countries? And that's no. Just because you see the same type of institution, you cannot assume that they're going to function or do the same thing. So, for example, you have U.S. Congress, you have the House of Commons, and the National People's Congress. There's the other legislative branches. And they do a lot. They do different things. So, for example, in the National People's Congress is just kind of like a rubber stamp. They meet and listen to statements, and they just say, "Yep, we agree," because the party leaders already made a decision on that. Separation, fusion of power. Separation of powers, again, the system of governance in which government power is divided into several bodies. They have the ability to check the power of the other, like our system in the United States. And there's also the fusion of powers, a system of governance in which all or most of the authority of the government is concentrated in one central location, one central body. Looking at the executive branch, we have some key terms here. It carries out the laws and policies of the state. There's always the head of state, so symbolizes and represents the people. May not have much policy making power. So, for example, the President of the United States has all these different roles. Sometimes there's different people carrying out these roles in the executive branch. Then there's the head of government, so this person's in charge of actually running the government. We'll see how Putin has changed this in Russia and how whatever his role is, he becomes the most powerful. But maybe it shouldn't be the way it was written down. There's chief executive, most important person in policy making. And then there's the cabinet, most important decision making body, usually in the parliamentary system. So the difference between those two, for the parliamentary and presidential system. Parliamentary system, citizens vote for legislative representatives. They pick the leader of the executive branch from the majority party, so you get elected in the legislative branch, and then a leader from the party that has the most people is now the head of the government. Head of state, again, is usually a symbolic figurehead compared to head of government, which is the day-to-day operations. In a parliamentary system, this is a fusion of power, so the executive and legislative branches are together, and the cabinet members are part of the majority party in the parliament. Again, in parliamentary, head of government usually called the prime minister. The MPs are individuals from the majority party. Have stipulated term in office. There is a maximum amount of time before new elections must be held. So prior to that, prime ministers could be removed or could call early parliamentary elections. Sometimes they have a vote of no confidence. So if a government with the majority party fails to get a support of a bill that they're trying to pass, then the government is forced to resign, and all the positions are up for re-election. So elections must be held in a very close period of time. Now, in your presidential system, that again, citizens vote for legislative representatives and executive branch leaders. The president becomes both the head of state and government. There's always the idea of separation of powers, checks and balances. The president gets to appoint people for their cabinet positions, and there's usually fixed terms. When we look at Russia, we will look at a semi-presidential system where there's also a prime minister and a president. They coexist. They have different duties. We'll see how Putin has changed that. So your presidential systems, Mexico, Nigeria, Iran. Iran also has a supreme leader, which we'll talk about. And then the semi-presidential system, Russia and China. China's non-democratic. Again, some advantages to parliamentary, very efficient in passing legislation. Disadvantage, instability, sometimes hasty decision making. In your presidential system, it's good to have the check on power, the checks and balances there. And a disadvantage, it's hard to remove an unpopular president. You have to wait for the re-election. And a lot of times there's gridlock amongst the legislatures. In a semi-presidential advantage, it shields the president from criticism. You can put blame on the prime minister. You can remove an unpopular prime minister. Disadvantage, confusion about accountability, who's actually accountable to the inefficient legislative decision making. For the legislature, there's a couple different ways. Bicameral again, one house or two houses. Unicameral, one house. Judiciaries, the set of institutions that are created to they interpret the public laws, they settle disputes, they enforce the criminal law. Is the functioning ideally. The judiciary plays a large role in maintaining the rule of law, and the rule of law is an important concept here. A governance system operating predictably under a known and transparent set of procedural laws. Again, in most of the countries that we talk about, though, the judiciary branch is relatively the weakest and usually pretty weak in each country. Judiciaries vary, again, from country to country. Courts in the authoritarian system have little or no independence. There's constitutional courts, which is usually the highest judicial branch, rules on all constitutional issues of laws. There's judicial review. Again, we know that to be the power of the judiciary branch to review laws and any executive actions. And then you have the judiciary is still a relatively weak branch. And we'll look at the different people, and even in the UK, how new it is compared to the United States. The idea of bureaucracies, again, agencies that implement all the government policies. So in democracies, they have discretionary power. The bureaucrats get the power to make small decisions on any legislative or executive decisions. It's usually pretty much the same over time. In authoritarian regimes, the head of government kind of exercises that control, and there's a patronage system where political supporters are getting jobs in return for getting the leader elected. So we'll do this for you, and then you can give me a better job in government. Again, these are usually non-elected positions. There's some formal qualifications, red tape, inefficiency. There's a lot of paperwork, things to go through in order to get things done. Other institutions that are common throughout all these countries: military, getting your armed forces to protect the nation state against invasion, maintain the power of the government within the nation state's borders. Intelligence agencies, again, operate domestic and international intelligence. Again, just a couple quick things here. Bureaucrats are appointed, usually salaried and not elected by the public, but they do have a lot of say. There's some, impersonal because they're goal-oriented, have little concern with personal feelings. They're just trying to get policies in place. There's some formal qualifications, so authoritarian must at least have education experience. Democracies have prerequisites for that appointment. Everyone has a boss except for the guy at the top. They're trying to get there and usually grow in size. The next portion here is the electoral system, FPTP, first past the post. So a plurality system used by the United States, UK, Nigeria. So basically a winner takes all. Winner must get more votes than anyone else. Does not require a majority, just the most votes. So your single membership districts. Those operate, candidates compete for one spot, representative spot. Encourages large broad-based parties because only one person can win that district. Plurality systems encourage large, again, broad-based. No matter how many people run a district, the person with the largest number of votes wins. So they become larger, kind of like umbrellas, embrace more voters. Parties without big groups of voters supporting them rarely have any hope of winning. The plurality system, again, using the U.S., Great Britain, Nigeria, some countries amend plurality rule throughout the use of runoff. So sometimes there's a runoff. The two candidates who receive the most votes in the first round then compete, and a majority must be met. You have your proportional representation, which we'll get to as well. It gives parties seats based on the percentage of the vote they receive. So a vote is cast for the party, not a candidate, so not one person, but for the party. So whoever gets put in those seats. So a party makes a list of their top candidates, in their party, and they rank them 1 through whatever. Then based on the percentages, how many people get to go into office. So this leads to high party unity. You're not going to say anything bad about your party. Candidates tend to support the party to put high, so they can get put high on the list and get put into office. Proportional representation can create multi-member districts then, so more than one legislative seat in each district. Again, ballots are cast for a party, not an individual. There's open versus closed list. Open, the people actually pick. The closed, the party picks. Percentage of votes, then a party gets determines the number of seats. This will, and then again, encourage multiple parties, not just two. I guess it's a pure form, a large number of small parties, because they have a good chance of getting some of their candidates elected. Could lead to a high number of parties with one seat. So most have a threshold. So it's not if you just had 1% of the votes. Most have a threshold of about 5%. Israel has the lowest at 2%. Russia, I know, has a threshold. It changes based on what Putin has determined. Again, another advantage of PR system, minority interests are represented. Women more likely to be represented as well. Disadvantage, too many small parties. A lot of times, the extremist parties will get a seat in the government. Now, there are mixed systems. Combines the first past the post and proportional. So some number of seats are single-member districts. Others are proportional based on the percentage in the party. A couple key ideas here. We have referendums, national ballot, called by government a policy issue. We just saw that with Brexit, and they had a referendum whether or not to leave the EU. Sometimes they do non-binding votes as well, just to gauge public interest and opinion on issues. There's initiatives, vote on a policy initiated by the people, not the government. So what maybe the people want, and they put it on the ballot. Then we have the one-party system. One-party system. One party operates, controls all the government. The voters have no really option to choose an opposition party. They do have elections, but their only option is from that one party. Communist states have one-party system like China. They direct all the political system. Small parties do exist, but and sometimes can compete in elections. Then we'll talk a lot about linkage institutions, your political parties as well. So two-party system. Party system, the two major parties that are competing for control of the government. Small parties exist like the United States, but don't really have any political clout. Again, 2.5 party system. Two large parties exist alongside a third party who receives a smaller but a notable share. So that would be like UK is a 3-party system or a 2.5 party system. Multi-party system. Party system. Several important political parties, none of which generally gains a majority in the seats in the legislature. Most European countries have multi-party systems. Usually arise in countries with strong parliamentary systems, and usually have the proportional representation elections. Looking at interest groups, the word corporatism will come up a lot. Fewer groups compete, usually one for each interest sector. The group's monopoly over its sector is usually officially approved by the state and protected by the state as well, because they're getting favors in return. There's state corporatism, which the state determines which groups are brought into the government and operate with the government. And then neo-corporatism, which interest groups take the lead and dominate the state. So it's based off of industry and business are kind of running things. And there's a quick look at autonomy from the state. So whether it's interest groups as transmission belts, so no autonomy from the state, to interest groups and pluralism, autonomy from the state. And that is part 4.